Welcome to Arash's World, where you will hear prominent voices, psychoanalysts, psychologists, therapists, philosophers, and thought leaders talk about a variety of mental health concerns and problems, including how to deal with anxiety, depression, and chronic conditions, and how to become more resilient, find inner peace, be emotionally engaged in your personal and professional life, and just be your beautiful, authentic self. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arash's World. Today we have a special guest, Kathryn MacDonald. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. And so I would like to start off with the toughest question first. How would you briefly describe yourself to our audience here? What would you say in any way you see fit?
That is a tough question. I think primarily, publicly at least, I see myself as a writer. I've probably written off and on my entire life, not always creatively. I've earned my living doing some of that. But primarily as a writer. I'm also a mom, a grandmother. I've been a sailor. I've tried many things. And as you know from my new book coming out, I've traveled a bit.
Yes, I was going to include world traveler in that, but I didn't know about the sailing. That's awesome. Yeah. So your upcoming book is a poetry collection, The Blue Gate. It's also National Poetry Month, so that's awesome too. And I wanna underline the importance of poetry, and we can talk a bit about that too. But what would you say about The Blue Gate, your poetry collection?
Well, The Blue Gate is, I think it's, well, I have a picture. It just arrived last night. And
Oh,
so
cool.
late last yesterday. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think you would describe me as a lyric poet in this book, although it is hybrid in that sections of the book are a mix of prose poetry and very short, dreamlike bits, insertions. The collection's essentially one long poem. And the beginning moves from the celebration of love through loss, and the long titular poem that ravels and unravels takes place in Kenya.
And that's the middle part. That's the Blue Gate, right? And it's
That's
kind
the
of
middle
like
part.
book-ended by different parts, I felt. But it kind of fits in terms of themes. And there's certain things I wrote down as I was going through it as motifs. So I've noted there's a lot of rain, there's love, there are birds, and there's death. And especially the other parts, like not the Blue Gate itself. I'm gonna focus on that a bit later, but why those specific things? Rain, love, birds, and death.
Well, I think rain is suggests a bountifulness.
Hmm.
And there was a bountifulness in the love. And I guess I love water. I like
Hmm.
streams and rivers and oceans, and I even like rain. Without it, we're a drought. It was droughty for the 10 years. I was in Kenya at the end of a 10-year period of drought. So there was that as well. And I've forgotten the rest of the question.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, that's amazing. Yeah, and rain, like I don't know, what in places, certain places you live in, like in Vancouver, where it rains a lot, and we complain about it. But again, the nurturing aspect of it, I think that's wonderful, and like the fact that people have rain dances, because again, when you're going through drought, you miss it, and especially it's important for livelihood as well, for growing plants and fruits and vegetables.
Mhm.
So I love the symbolism of that. And what about the birds, though?
Oh, the birds.
Yeah.
Well, the especially the red-tailed hawk became a major symbol of love.
Hmm.
The hawks, we actually had hawks mating on our farm, and
Wow.
we would see them often and hear them because they make the most awful scream. It's a tearing. It's loud, and you can't ignore it when they're doing it. But they mate for life, and their courtship involves what we call skydancing. The male and the female come together and they grasp talons and they just drop. They drop to earth and spin. And I think that that's a great metaphor for the trust that develops when you love someone. Yeah. So for me, it was visual, physical, and so the birds, and yes, the birds.
That's pretty amazing. Because the poem Skydancing, I actually singled out, and I would like you to read it for us a bit later. So that's awesome. Like I really I like that poem. Now I understand why a bit better, because of what it symbolizes. Let's talk also about Blue Gate, which is again a large part of the middle section, and I think that's again mostly set in Kenya, right? And what I love about that, again, what I wrote in terms of, again, motifs that I saw more serendipity, which I found very interesting. And I really want to talk about that. Longing as well. And it starts off with a quote by Rebecca Solnit. Blue is the color of longing for the distance you never arrive in. And it's also, again, the Blue Gate. And blue is my favorite color. So already that resonated with me. It's also related to water, which is kind of interesting too. But what about serendipity? What would you say?
Oh, my goodness. The whole thing seems to me it was serendipitous. My trip to Africa was certainly serendipity. I was invited by a friend to accompany her and her partner to travel to Africa with them. I went over to see my friend about 2 weeks after my husband Jim died, and I was probably a wreck. I'm sure I was. Anyway, I guess she felt sorry for me. She asked me if I'd like to go on the trip, and I said yes. And then they couldn't go. And she called one day and said that, well, they couldn't go, and would I like to go alone? That our host was willing to take me by myself. And I said yes. And I suppose that's the biggest part of the serendipity. And I think it is probably representative of the way I live and make decisions. I do it quite spontaneously. And in this case, I was sitting in that liminal space, that Solnit references there, when you're on the threshold in between what was and a complete unknown. And do you say yes and step over the threshold of life, or do you step back and probably, stop living in any real sense of life and enjoyment and opening yourself to new experience? I said yes, and I went to Kenya.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. And that's, again, really stepping out of your comfort zone, because, again, have you ever been to Kenya? Was that the first time?
That was the first time.
Wow.
I don't think I'd ever traveled outside other than going to the U.S., which is, next door.
Yeah.
I hadn't traveled at all.
Yeah, and then there you go. Like interesting decision there. I mean, that's wonderful. But also, I love in the poems where you give us glimpses of what that life would look like. I want to talk about that too. Waking up to elephants' trumpets. I mean, I can't imagine that. It's like the alarm clock is like a natural way of waking up. And also, I like the line too, and I noted this: "Do not open the window; monkeys will come in." So, tell us about that.
Oh, the monkeys. That was my very first evening. I traveled on the Dutch airline, so I flew from Toronto to the Netherlands, and from there to Kenya. And I had been traveling for ages. In fact, the night before, I actually went to Toronto before I caught the plane. So by the time I reached Kenya, I was exhausted. I'd spent most of my time, sitting, waiting, or in the flight. And got to Kenya, and my host's wife, Esther, had made a big dinner, invited family, and it was 10 o'clock at night. And I could hardly wait to finish the meal and quit being polite and get to bed. And she came in and shut the windows. And that's what she said to me: don't open the windows or monkeys will come in. And I was already living in a very surreal, dreamlike place, just through grief alone, but then the travel, and then the monkeys. But of course, it wasn't monkeys. In the dream, or in the night, it was the dream and my husband's visit.
Oh, I see. Okay. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. And what were some cases, I'm sure, of culture shock? What was something that kind of jolted you in a way where it's like, oh, this is very different. Yeah, we're not in Kansas or Toronto or Canada anymore. When did that happen at certain moments where you go, wow?
Well, I think, if truth be told, that happened when my husband died. Maybe I should have had some clues, but I didn't. And at that point, everything became surreal.
Yeah.
That's when I went into culture shock. So going into Africa and experiencing very, very different things from my life in Canada, I just rolled with it. It did not seem bizarre because I was living these two realities. The reality of the world as we know it, a table, food on it, the elephants, all of that I just accepted because I was also living in that state that was very real to me, but people wouldn't have accepted it as being real. And that comes out in the italicized bits in the poems.
There's an openness that you have. And again, serendipity makes so much more sense because, this happens at the right moment. Things happen at the right moment. And that's when you have the trip and it doesn't overwhelm you because you're in that interesting in-between mind state, right, when you arrived.
Right.
That's amazing. And so what about the language, Swahili? And I find it interesting that there is a glossary there and you're using some of those words. And I love the spelling of blue, by the way, in Swahili with the two U's. And how was that experience too of like engaging again with the language that is pretty unknown to probably to most of us?
That was really, really interesting because my guide, Kyoko, his family was from a little village called Masi. Now, he was internationally educated and internationally a professional, but his wife, his second wife, Esther, his first wife had died in an accident, but his first wife was a village girl, and I really don't think she was very competent in English. And the TV was always on, and it was always in Swahili. So if I wanted to watch the news, I had to learn a bit. And surprisingly enough, when you're submerged in a culture, you actually pick things up so that I had a sense of what was going on in the world. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to discuss it intelligently. I couldn't discuss most things in Swahili, but I was sympathetic to the language, and it wasn't any more strange than anything else I was experiencing. So I just rolled with it, I guess.
And how much time did you spend in Kenya altogether?
I spent a month.
A month. Okay. Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. And so, for writing, for putting together your book, your poetry collection, the mention of certain influences, like in the book, and I noted some. So Rebecca Solnit's quote that we had, the book "Out of Africa" by Karen Blixen, which I've read and I've seen the movie, and I love both. I find that very, very fascinating to read about that. You mentioned also The Constant Gardener, which is, I've only seen the film, which I was quite impressed with. And also a very famous poet Rilke are some of the influences. So how did they come in with, again, comparing with writing your poetry?
Well, it's very strange how things happen. And um, out of Africa, the week before I flew, someone mentioned to me I might want to get a book for the plane. Hadn't even thought of that, but I went to the bookstore, and Out of Africa just kind of popped into my hands, along
Nice.
with, excuse me, along with Solnit's book,
Okay.
the A Field Guide to Getting Lost.
Mm.
I had read neither of them. So on the plane, going over, I started to read Out of Africa. I certainly didn't get very far. Um, I sat beside a young basketball player that was going to Lyon, France, and we
Hmm.
talked most of the trip.
Okay.
Uh, so anyway, Out of Africa, I found very interesting, and Kyoko actually took me to the house where the film was made. It wasn't actually Karen Blixen's home, but
Mm.
it was one that was designed for the movie.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think when you're a poet, maybe all writers, but certainly a poet, you read a lot. You read a lot of other people.
Hmm.
You're trying to improve your own craft, and you're a member of a writing community. So in
Hmm.
my opinion, you kind of need to know what other writers are writing. And um, I, I guess I referred and quoted those three because they spoke to me.
Hmm.
They spoke to me very clearly.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially at this point of time too. And so what generally is poetry to you? What does it represent? For me, I when I occasionally write, it's just like when I think like when I write or when I read poetry, it's like expressing something that I think other things can't, that goes beyond regular language. And I think that is like this special one. Music is another form, but I think poetry it comes really close, especially it is musical, the way we put words together. So that is like the stuff that is really hard to express in words, in regular words. I see that as poetry. And how would you say, what does poetry represent to you? Why are you drawn to it? Why did you also start writing it, for example?
Oh, well, I agree with everything you said about poetry. It says what music says,
Hmm.
except it uses words. It says what art says. I know that I was influenced by the surrealist painters uh, in particular. They gave me confidence to write on both that dreamlike, internal, unconscious, Jungian kind of
Right.
reality
Hmm.
side by side, it intermingled with the day to day reality. Uh, and poetry, I actually started to write this story, this narrative in prose. I had written a fiction before, and you can't say these things in prose. You simply can't say them. So poetry was it. But poetry is my first love. I find
Hmm.
it much more challenging. I was privileged in university to have taken a course with Alistair MacLeod, the great short story writer. And when he found out that I wanted to be a poet, um, he was a he just cautioned me that the shorter the form, the more difficult to write. So that in poetry, every word must count. And it must mean something. And it must mean something in a layered way so that you have some satisfaction, I guess, in writing it. But a reader can take from it what they want. You're not telling them the whole story. You're allowing space, space on the page, space between the words. You're allowing readers space to engage, to imagine themselves. And you're, in my mind, I'm hoping to free their imagination to experience with me, but to bring along their own thoughts and their own experiences.
That's very poetic. Yeah, exactly. Your explanation is very poetic. And I think that's also like in like reading and like a writer's group, when it comes to poetry, there's sometimes completely different interpretations, sometimes opposite ones, which I find fascinating. Whereas in fiction, it's kind of clearer. We kind of get the idea, but that openness, I think, makes it so much more playful, wonderful, and you can express so much more with it.
Yes. Yeah. Poetry is so special. And I'm frustrated a bit because, people are afraid of it, step back from it. People say, well, I don't read poetry. And yet it is the most open and inviting form of writing, I think.
Yeah, it's the fear when they don't even approach it. Then it's like, I won't get it, right? And I think like it depends, because certain poems really, like you said, also speak to me, and others don't. The others are just don't do anything. And that's with anything, right? Even with music, it's like certain music we respond to and resonate with, and others we don't. But not to just base it on just one general idea we think, oh, this is beyond me. I think, again, you have to find your own types of poems.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd like you to read here maybe a couple of poems, since we have the poet here. And I definitely want to hear Skydancing. Would that be okay? And here, page 24 on my notes. And yeah, if you can read it for us, please.
Okay. Now, Skydancing. Two red-tailed hawks carve circles in a clear sky. Sunshine glances off rufous tails, sets feathers to embers, a dive by one, then the other. The pair rise with field mice or voles, a rabbit kit clasped on hooked talons. The hawks nest high in the elm above our circular pond. The trees' leafless branches silver against the sky. Deer sip spring-fed waters, and we give ourselves to bacchanal afternoons, le jeûner sur herbe, forget the surprise of death. And forgive me, I've mangled the French. It's the painting, the afternoon picnic.
And that I like the connection with painting too, like as you mentioned earlier, that and that comes to mind and evokes a lot of images too as well. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Is there any other you'd like to share with us here with the audience?
Oh, I have so many marked. Do you have any preference?
No, you picked out. That was the one I really wanted to hear. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll read the last poem in the book, because the third section, the final section of the book, it deals with the return. And it isn't the end of grief. I mean, the people, particularly in our Western culture, it was very, very different. The idea of death and life is very different in Kenya than it is here. People think after a few weeks or a few months, you should be over it. Well, you're not. So I wasn't, and I don't think many people are. The final poem is called Albinoni's Adagio. 10 years, soon 11. Dawns and dusks merge, while all the sorcery I conjure fails to resurrect you. Hauser's cello fills the air with cavernous yearning. Still, I live. Hauser makes love to his cello, as you did to me, passionately, tenderly, salt on our lips, honey whispers in the room. Albinoni's Adagio rises, falls, swells into fullness, slowly cascades into silence to haunt each blue breath. And still I live.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. The wonderful poems. Again, your poetry collection is The Blue Gate. Kathryn MacDonald, you're a poet, world traveler, and thank you so much for being on Arash's World. Such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.